Thunder!
How's it going, everybody? Look, let me just cut right to the chase. You guys know why you clicked on this video. I think it's about time that I throw my hat in the ring and give my ideas on what I think the next system is going to be after the Switch. And I do have a feeling that it is coming out early 2024. I know, you've seen countless videos of people saying, oh, the next Nintendo Switch is right around the corner. Oh, the system's coming this year, the system's coming next year. You see so many of them. I've seen so many of them, and they get a little bit annoying, but here's the thing. The games that are on the release schedule for the Switch for the rest of the year, they're not like small games necessarily, but they're also not like the massive games like a new 3D Mario, Metroid Prime 4, a new Pokemon. And it feels like Nintendo is really saving those games for the next system. And I think we have a little bit more evidence of that too, because just a few days ago, it actually came out in the FTC hearing of all things for Microsoft acquiring Activision Blizzard that they have information about Nintendo potentially releasing a new system as early as 2024, and early 2024 at that. So yeah, I'm really on board with the idea that the next system is coming out fairly soon. So with that being said, there's a lot of factors that go into the launch of a next system, and it goes beyond just hardware. There's tons of stuff to consider, like launch lineup, how they're going to market the thing, but I'm going to start with hardware because that feels like a safe point to sort of jump off from. So starting with hardware, I'm not expecting this thing to stand toe-to-toe with Sony and Microsoft, but I think we need something that can at least handle games for its entire lifespan without having the issues of running certain games later in its life. Honestly, my hope is something on par with the Steam Deck, if not a tad bit more powerful. If Nvidia is still on board with this, I think that DLSS is absolutely going to be putting in a lot of legwork, which should allow for the next system to get much more out of the hardware it will have. And to make things perfectly clear, I do think that it's going to be a Switch 2. I think that the Switch, its formula is way too successful for Nintendo to just abandon. So I think that the whole idea of a hybrid system is going to be their plan going forward, at least for the next console. So then if this system is a successor to the Switch, I'm hoping that this will be Nintendo's first 4K system. Now, I'm not expecting 4K for everything across the board, but just having the option for the system to be able to support it would be really nice to see. Likewise, I also want handheld mode to be 1080p. If this next system is going to be a significant jump from the current Switch, I don't think that handheld 1080p should be too much of an issue pulling off. I'm essentially expecting any current Switch games to be able to have the same performance they would have in docked mode, but in handheld on this next system, which actually leads into my next big want for the system: backwards compatibility. I think that everyone is assuming that this next system is going to be backwards compatible. Nintendo has already said current Nintendo accounts are going to work on the next system, and with Nintendo having one of their largest audiences ever with the Switch, I can't see them wanting to abandon that consumer base with the new console. With backwards compatibility, I'm also expecting to see day one patches for bigger releases. They'll really help with the launch of this new system if day one there are big upgrade patches for games like Zelda and Pokemon. It feels safe to assume that this backwards compatibility should also extend to NSO offerings as well. I see no reason why the current NSO games wouldn't work on the new system if it is backwards compatible. Now, for new NSO offerings, this is where I want Nintendo to make a change. So while we still might see new games get added to the current systems offered on NSO, I'm not expecting too much more from them beyond just having the full catalogs available at launch. But we gotta talk about the other systems, because we're finally getting to the point where we can talk about the potential for GameCube and Wii games on NSO. So I don't think that Nintendo will just give us GameCube and Wii games through a subscription service. Instead, I feel like we might finally see a return of somewhat of a virtual console. Nintendo already has solid emulators for GameCube and Wii, as we already saw them utilized for Mario 3D All-Stars. I'm guessing that these titles would be ones that could be purchased individually too. Now, for NSO users, I could see them, of course, having the online capabilities for these games included, but also maybe heavy discounts on these titles exclusive for NSO subscribers. So one more fun idea that I want to add on to this is something that I don't think Nintendo will ever do, but I still want to hope for it. Remember how Nintendo accounts were able to be created or merged with existing Nintendo network IDs from the 3DS and Wii U era? Well, considering that they are technically the same accounts we had during that era, I think it would be really cool if purchases could transfer over to this new virtual console, because on the Wii U, you had the ability to purchase full Wii games. I would love it if those purchases purchases were still honored on the new system. I know it'll probably never happen, but it would be kind of nice for Nintendo to throw a little something nice to all of us that had to painfully endure being Wii U owners. So, jokes aside, while all of this backwards compatibility and legacy content will be great for the next system, Nintendo should also still make sure that the console has a solid launch lineup. As much as I love the Switch, I think we can all agree that its launch was fairly weak. Sure, we had Breath of the Wild, but other than that, there were not too many standout titles for the system at launch from Nintendo and third parties. There were still a handful of indie titles on the eShop at launch, but it would have been nice to get more variety from some bigger games. Of course, Nintendo is going to have a big game to launch the console with, and I'm leaning towards Metroid Prime 4 or a new 3D Mario, but I think it would be huge if Nintendo could get some bigger third-party exclusives to be on the system day one. It's always important to give consumers variety when launching a new system like this. So before I get into my final talking point, I want to touch on a few more smaller things before we get into that. The first being online. Now, online is becoming increasingly important for Nintendo because they have multiple titles that depend on a stable connection. Games like Splatoon, Mario Kart, Smash, and hopefully more online-focused titles coming from them in the future. But for these titles to perform to their full potential, Nintendo needs to have better online. It's not an absolute deal breaker for me, but as someone who plays on other systems, who plays on PC, and has seen what proper online can be and the potential of that, Nintendo's really gotta step it up. Another minor thing, and this is more just a personal gripe that I have, is I want the system to have a lot more flair in its UI, namely in the shop and potentially adding themes, because while I do get what Nintendo was going for with the more minimalistic aesthetic with the Switch, I love themes. I love having music in the shop. I miss what we had in sort of that Wii U, 3DS era where it really felt like the system itself had this identity to it, and it was unique to that system, and it was more fun. It was more Nintendo-y. It's weird to say, but it's just something that I really liked, and I liked having the customization with themes to really make the system feel like your own, so hopefully that's something that returns in the future. Alright, so getting into my final point that I want to discuss. This is something that I haven't seen a ton of people talking about with the new system, but it's still important nonetheless. How the hell is Nintendo going to market this thing? Now, that might be a silly thing to ask considering that the Switch is one of Nintendo's most successful systems, it's a massive success, and it's gained such a large and loyal audience, but you have to remember what happened with Nintendo from the Wii to the Wii U. Nintendo was in a similar position. The Wii was selling incredibly well, Nintendo was at the top, it felt like they couldn't go anywhere but up, and then the Wii U happened. And it is one of Nintendo's most infamous commercial failures because, yes, the system, it had its own flaws. It failed for a multitude of reasons I really don't want to get into right now, but the marketing was such a huge part of it because when the Wii U was announced, casual audiences, they weren't sure what this thing was. Was it an add-on to the Wii? Was it a step up, sort of like the PS4 Pro or like the Xbox One X? People didn't know. Nintendo should have just called it the Wii 2, made it very clear that this was a direct follow-up to the Wii, but instead they named it the Wii U, and marketing got a little bit confusing. So my big request from Nintendo is make sure that if this is a follow-up to the Switch, that you name it in such a way where there's no room for confusion in what this thing is. Don't call it the Nintendo Switch Plus. Don't call it the Nintendo Switch U. Don't call it the new Nintendo Switch or the Switch Pro. If this is a direct successor to the Nintendo Switch, you need to name it as such. And now I'm not saying call it the Switch 2 because Nintendo's never been known for doing numbered follow-ups to their consoles. So maybe they call it something like the Nintendo Super Switch or the Nintendo Switch Advance or the Switch Ultra or something like that. But just a name that really makes it feel like, oh, this is the next evolution of the Nintendo Switch. And then going beyond the whole naming convention, another thing that they need to learn from that Wii U era is to make sure not to get too focused in on a specific demographic. Because the thing with the Wii U, with its marketing, it became too focused on that family-friendly aspect that the Wii had, where it was like overly friendly, almost way too childish with its marketing. And I've seen some of that trickling in with like recent advertisements for Pikmin 4, but I wouldn't worry too much about it. I think that Nintendo has it locked in where they're just marketing this to everyone, where it's like anyone can pick up a Switch, you can play it anywhere, and they just need to stick with that. Because as much as I'd like a new identity to the Switch's campaign, something like the Play It Loud or even like the weird GameCube and DS campaigns, I want Nintendo to keep it as simple and as understandable for consumers so we do not have a repeat of what happened with the Wii U's launch. Alright, I'm gonna stop myself there because this is just turning more into a rant about the Wii U rather than talking about what Nintendo's next system is gonna be. So I'm gonna leave it at that. I'd love to see your own ideas on what you think Nintendo's next console is gonna be, because I do think that it is right around the corner. I think that 2024 is gonna be where we're gonna see this thing revealed, where we're gonna see it launched, and I hope that it is a big success. But for now, I think that that is enough out of me. So if you guys like this video, feel free to like and subscribe, and I will see you all in the next video. Later.